The air in the emergency room of Metropolitan General is a toxic soup. It smells of antiseptic, stale coffee, and the metallic tang of blood. It's a smell Nurse Alara Vance knows too well. It clings to her scrubs, her hair, her very soul. She moves through the chaos with her shoulders hunched, her eyes fixed on the scuffed linoleum floor. A ghost in blue, trying to be invisible. It never worked. Vance, get in here. The voice was a whip crack, slicing through the constant hum of monitors and hushed conversations. It belonged to Dr. Alistair Finch, Chief of Trauma Surgery, a man who wielded his authority like a sharpened bone saw. Alara flinched, a barely perceptible tremor. She took a steadying breath and pushed through the double doors into Trauma Bay 3. The scene was controlled chaos. A multi-car pile-up victim was on the table, and Finch was orchestrating the ballet of life and death with his signature blend of brilliance and brutality. "I asked for a tin blade, not a butter knife," he snarled, not looking at her, but at the junior resident who had handed him the wrong scalpel. He tossed the instrument onto a steel tray with a clatter that made Alara jump. "And you," he said, his cold blue eyes finally landing on her. "You're hovering like a lost moth. Are you going to contribute, or are you just here to take up oxygen?" A few of the other nurses, Finch's sycophants, snickered. They loved the show. They fed on his cruelty because it was never directed at them. I was just checking the stock, Dr. Finch," Alara mumbled, her voice barely a whisper. Her gaze dropped back to the floor. It was safer there. "Checking the stock," he repeated, his voice dripping with condescending disbelief. "The man on this table is bleeding out, and you're checking the stock. Your priorities are, as always, an inspiration to us all, Vance." He turned his back on her, a dismissal more potent than any direct command. "Get out. Go count tongue depressors or something else within your limited grasp of medicine. Don't let me see your face in my trauma bay again unless you've miraculously developed a spine." Alara backed away, her cheeks burning with a familiar, hot shame. The snickers followed her out of the room. She retreated to the relative quiet of the supply closet, her sanctuary. The cool metal of the shelves against her forehead did little to soothe the sting. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, the smell of antiseptic was replaced by the smell of hot sand and jet fuel. The hum of the hospital faded, replaced by the thrum of helicopter rotors. A scar, a thin silver line, pulled at the skin just below her hairline, hidden by her bangs. She touched it unconsciously. A reminder of a different life. A life where she was not a ghost. A life where she was not clumsy, timid Alara. She forced the memory down. That person was gone, buried. This quiet, miserable life was her penance. It was what she deserved. She was Nurse Vance, slow, hesitant, incompetent. The hospital's favorite joke. She had to be. It was the only way to stay hidden. The only way to stay safe. She spent the next hour doing exactly as he'd said. She counted tongue depressors. She restocked gauze pads. She organized saline bags. Menial tasks. Busy work designed to keep her out of the way. She moved with a deliberate slowness, a practiced hesitation in every step. It was a role she had perfected over 2 long years. Sarah, a younger nurse with kind eyes, found her in the linen closet. "Don't listen to him, Alara," she whispered, handing her a fresh stack of towels. "He's an arrogant pig." Alara offered a weak, watery smile. "It's okay. He's a brilliant surgeon." It was the same excuse everyone made for him, the same one she made for him. "Brilliance isn't an excuse for cruelty," Sarah insisted, her voice low. "One day, someone's going to stand up to him." Alara just shook her head, her bangs falling over her eyes. "Not me," she whispered. "I just want to do my job and go home." But the quiet she craved was a fantasy. The emergency room never slept. The next crisis was always just a siren away. This time, it arrived without one. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and the paramedics wheeled in a man who seemed to have materialized from a nightmare. He was strapped to a gurney, his clothes torn and caked in a mixture of mud and dried blood. A thick, unkempt beard covered the lower half of his face, but it couldn't hide the sharp, angular jawline beneath. His body was a roadmap of violence. Bruises, deep in purple, mottled his skin. Lacerations crisscrossed his arms and chest. But it was his eyes that captured the room. They were wide open, a startling, piercing blue, and they burned with an intensity that was terrifying. He was conscious, but unresponsive. He stared straight ahead, seeing nothing and everything. "Got a John Doe for you," the lead paramedic said, his voice strained. "Found him in an alley downtown. No ID, no wallet. Completely nonverbal. Vitals are all over the place. BP is spiking and then tanking. Heart rate is doing the tango." Finch, fresh from his surgical triumph, strode over to the gurney. He took one look at the man, his lip curling in disgust. He saw a homeless man, a derelict, a drain on resources. "Another one," he sighed with theatrical weariness. "Probably high on bath salts or some other gutter cocktail. Check his talk screen, give him a saline drip, and move him to the psych ward for observation once he's stable. I'm not wasting my best trauma bay on a vagrant." His pronouncement was final. The other doctors and nurses began to move, following the protocol Finch had laid out. They were efficient. They were detached. They were wrong. Alara stood frozen at the edge of the room. She wasn't seeing a vagrant. She wasn't seeing a drug addict. She was seeing something else, something terrifyingly familiar. She saw the rigid posture, even while strapped down. She saw the specific pattern of the bruising on his torso, not random marks from a street fight, but the telltale signs of close-quarters combat. And she saw his eyes, the 1,000-yard stare, the look of a man who had seen hell and brought a piece of it back with him. But there was something else. A subtle, almost imperceptible tremor in his left hand, a tiny rhythmic twitching of his eyelid, a faint sheen of sweat on his brow that had nothing to do with the humid ER air. "Dr. Finch," she said, her voice louder than she intended. The room quieted for a half-second. All eyes turned to her, to the mousy nurse who never spoke. Finch turned slowly, an eyebrow arched in dangerous amusement. "Did you say something, Vance? I thought I smelled ozone. It must be the friction from your two brain cells rubbing together." The sycophants laughed on cue. Alara's face flushed, but she stood her ground. "Doctor, his symptoms, they're not consistent with a simple overdose." Finch walked toward her, his movements slow and predatory. He stopped just inches from her face. "Is that your expert medical opinion, Nurse Vance? Based on your extensive experience counting bedpans?" "The micro-tremors," she pushed on, her heart hammering against her ribs. "The intermittent autonomic dysfunction. The nystagmus. It could be a blast wave injury. A pressure wave contusion to the brainstem. If we treat it as an overdose, if we don't reduce the intracranial pressure immediately, he could have a cerebral hemorrhage and die." Finch finished for her, his voice a silky, mocking purr. My, you've been reading textbooks. How adorable." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Let me be perfectly clear. You are a nurse, a barely competent one at that. You do not diagnose. You do not question my orders. You will take this garbage, and you will put him in the hallway until a bed opens up in psych. Am I understood?" He didn't wait for an answer. He turned his back on her again, addressing the room. "Let's get back to work, people. We have actual patients to save." The team moved to unhook the John Doe from the trauma bay monitors. They were going to wheel him into the corridor. They were going to let him die. Alara watched them. She saw the flicker of Sarah's worried eyes. She saw the smug satisfaction on the faces of the others. She saw Finch, standing like a king, utterly confident in his own infallibility. And then she looked at the man on the gurney. His burning blue eyes met hers for a fraction of a second. In that instant, She didn't see a stranger. She saw a brother. She saw every soldier she had ever patched up in the dust and chaos of a war zone. She saw the promise she had made to herself, the one she had broken. Leave no one behind. Something inside her, a thing she had kept chained and buried for 2 years, snapped its fetters. "No," she said. The word was quiet, but it cut through the air like a scalpel. Finch stopped. The entire ER seemed to hold its breath. He turned, a look of genuine shock on his face, quickly replaced by incandescent rage. "What did you just say?" Alara stepped forward, placing herself between Finch and the gurney. Her posture had changed. Her shoulders were back. Her chin was up. The ghost was gone. "I said no. You are not moving him. You are not treating him for an overdose. Your diagnosis is wrong. It's catastrophically wrong." Finch's face went from red to a blotchy, furious purple. "You are finished," he hissed. "Security! Get this insubordinate washout out of my hospital." But Alara was already moving. The years of practiced slowness evaporated. She moved with a fluid, terrifying efficiency. Her hands, which usually fumbled with IV lines, were now a blur of precise motion. "I need a crash cart. Now!" "Now," she barked. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was a commander's voice. A voice that expected and received instant obedience. The junior resident, the same one Finch had berated, instinctively wheeled the cart over. "What do you think you're doing?" Finch bellowed, striding towards her. "My job," Alara said without looking at him. Her eyes were locked on the patient. "I need mannitol, 20% solution, and a number 7 endotracheal tube, and someone get me a goddamn arterial line kit." She ignored the security guards who had just arrived, looking confused. She ignored Finch, who was sputtering with rage. Her world had narrowed to the man on the table and the ticking clock inside his skull. "He's crashing!" Sarah yelled, pointing at the monitor Alara had reattached. The man's blood pressure was plummeting. His heart rate was a chaotic scribble. "He's not crashing, he's coning," Alara corrected, her voice ice cold and steady. "His brainstem is herniating. We have maybe 90 seconds. She ripped open a sterile pack with her teeth. She pulled out a large bore needle. Finch finally seemed to grasp what she was about to do. "Vance, don't you dare!" he shrieked. "That's a cricothyrotomy. You're not certified. You'll kill him." "He's already dead if I don't," she shot back. She palpated the man's neck with a practiced touch, finding the cricothyroid membrane in a heartbeat. She didn't hesitate. She plunged the needle in. A gush of air. She then performed a lightning-fast intubation, securing his airway. Her movements were not the movements of a clumsy nurse. They were the movements of a seasoned combat medic, an expert. The security guards finally reached her, grabbing her arms. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." "Get your hands off my nurse," a new voice growled. Everyone turned. The John Doe. His eyes were no longer vacant. They were focused, laser-focused, on the security guards holding Alara. He was still strapped down, still paralyzed by his condition, but his voice was clear and hard as granite. Finch stared, dumbfounded. "He can talk?" Alara didn't have time for that. She had secured his airway, but the pressure in his head was still a death sentence. She grabbed the vial of mannitol. It wasn't standard ER stock for this kind of application. It was from her own locker. From a small, hidden kit she carried with her every day. A kit filled with ghosts. "Stop her!" Finch screamed. "That's an unauthorized medication. She's poisoning him." One of the guards, a burly man named Dave, lunged for the IV line. Alara moved. It wasn't a push. It wasn't a shove. It was a precise, economical movement. A palm heel strike to the guard's sternum that sent him stumbling back, gasping for air. The other guard froze, his eyes wide with shock. Alara injected the mannitol into the IV port. "Pushing 100 grams, she said, her voice a calm report in the middle of a hurricane. "It'll buy us 20 minutes, maybe more." She turned to Finch. The timid, mousy nurse was completely gone. In her place stood a woman of pure, unadulterated steel. "You are relieved of care for this patient, doctor. You are a liability." Finch's face was a mask of apoplectic fury. He pointed a shaking finger at her. "You're fired, Vance! You're fired! And I'll see to it that you never work as a nurse again. I'll have your license revoked. Security, get her out of here. Get her out of my hospital." This time, the guards didn't hesitate. They were angry and embarrassed. They grabbed Alara's arms, much more forcefully this time, and began to drag her away from the trauma bay. "Don't touch her," the man on the gurney gritted out, straining against his restraints. But his voice was weaker now. The effort was too much. Alara didn't fight them. She had done what she could. She had bought him time. As they hauled her past the nurse's station, she saw Sarah staring, her face pale with a mixture of terror and awe. She saw the other nurses looking at her, as if seeing her for the first time. They dragged her through the automatic doors and out into the cool night air. The rain had started, a miserable, cold drizzle. One of the guards shoved her forward. "Stay off hospital property. You're trespassing now." Her badge was ripped from her scrubs. Her bag was tossed onto the wet pavement beside her. The doors slid shut, leaving her alone in the rain. Fired. Disgraced. Her career in ruins. The quiet life she had tried so desperately to build was shattered. And for what? For a man whose name she didn't even know. A man who was probably going to die anyway, now that she was gone. A wave of despair washed over her, so profound it made her knees weak. She sank onto the wet curb, the cold rain soaking through her thin scrubs. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. The ghost was back. Timid, broken Alara Vance. She had tried to be someone else for a few minutes, and this was the price. The rotors came first. A low, deep thumping that vibrated in her chest. It grew louder, closer. Not the familiar sound of the hospital's single medevac helicopter. This was different, deeper, more powerful, plural. She looked up. Two sleek black helicopters, without any markings, were descending from the night sky. They weren't heading for the hospital's helipad. They were coming down right in the middle of the street, their powerful rotor wash blasting rain and debris in every direction. Cars screeched to a halt. People stared, their faces illuminated by the strobing landing lights. Doors slid open before the skids even touched the asphalt. Men began to rappel down, moving with the terrifying speed and grace of spiders. They were clad in black tactical gear, armed with rifles held at a low ready. They formed a perimeter, securing the street in seconds. It was an invasion, a military operation unfolding in the middle of a city block. Alara stared, her blood running cold. She knew what she was seeing. Special operations. The best of the best. What were they doing here? A black armored SUV, the kind used by government agencies, peeled away from the curb down the street and screeched to a halt directly in front of her. The back door opened. A man in a crisp, decorated military uniform leaned out. He had 4 stars on his shoulder. A general. His face was weathered, stern, but his eyes were searching, and they landed on her. "Nurse Vance?" he asked, his voice calm and authoritative amidst the managed chaos. Alara could only nod, speechless. "We've been looking for you," the general said. "My name is General Marcus Thorne. I need you to come with me. Now." She hesitated for only a second. What other choice did she have? She was fired, soaked, and alone. She picked up her bag and climbed into the vehicle. The door slammed shut, cocooning her in a world of quiet leather and glowing electronics. As the SUV pulled away, General Thorne looked at her. "You have no idea how much trouble you're in, do you?" Alara's heart sank. "I was just trying to save him." The general's stern expression softened slightly. "I'm not talking about your hospital administration, son. I'm talking about the people who did that to my operator. You just painted a target on your back the size of Texas." He paused, his gaze intense. "The man you saved. His name is Master Sergeant Alex Reaper Thorne. He's my son, and he's one of the most critical assets in United States Special Operations Command. Alara's mind reeled. The John Doe, the vagrant, was the general's son, a master sergeant, Reaper. It all clicked into place. Maez. The fitness, the injuries, the stare. He was on a mission to recover a stolen nerve agent, VX-9, the general continued, his voice grim. He was ambushed. His team was wiped out. He's the only one who knows where the agent is now. The information is likely locked in his memory, but his neurological condition is complicated. The people who want that agent want him dead. They probably have someone on the inside. Someone they paid to make sure he didn't survive the ER. Dr. Finch. His arrogance wasn't just professional pride. It was a cover. He wasn't just trying to get rid of a vagrant. He was trying to commit murder for hire. We heard a commotion over the hospital's security feed, which we were monitoring, Thorne explained. We saw what you did. You performed a field-expedient cricothyrotomy and administered a non-standard counter-pressure agent under extreme duress. You correctly diagnosed a TBI that our own remote medics missed. You, Nurse Vance, are the reason my son is still alive. The SUV was now heading back towards the hospital, part of a convoy with the armored tactical vehicles. There's something else, the general said, looking at a tablet in his hand. Your file is heavily redacted. 2 years ago, you just appeared. Before that, nothing. But I have friends in high places. It took some doing, but I found you. He turned the tablet to face her. On the screen was a photograph. A younger Alara, her face smudged with grime, wearing flight gear. Her hair was pulled back tight, and she wore no bangs. The scar on her forehead was fresh, angry, and red. The nameplate on her uniform read, Vance. The insignia was that of a United States Air Force pararescueman, a PJ, one of the most elite and highly trained combat medics in the world. Staff Sergeant Alara Angel Vance, the general said softly. Distinguished Service Cross recipient. 2 tours. Credited with 117 combat saves. Until you vanished after an operation in the Hindu Kush went sideways. The one where you got that scar. The memories she had fought so hard to suppress came rushing back. The burning helicopter. The screams. The weight of a fallen comrade in her arms. The failure. The one she couldn't save. Tears welled in her eyes. I left, she whispered, her voice thick with shame. I couldn't do it anymore. You saved everyone you could, Thorne said gently. Sometimes, that's not everyone. It's a lesson every soldier has to learn. He looked at her, his eyes filled not with judgment, but with a profound understanding. But right now, I need that soldier back. I need Angel back. My son's life depends on it. The convoy screeched to a halt in front of the ER entrance, the one she had been thrown out of not 20 minutes earlier. The special operators had already secured the entrance. The hospital staff, including Dr. Finch, were huddled behind the reception desk, looking terrified. General Thorne got out of the SUV Alara, taking a deep, shaky breath, followed him. She was no longer just Nurse Vance. She was someone else. Someone she had tried to forget. They strode into the emergency room, flanked by 2 massive, heavily armed operators. The air crackled with tension. Finch saw her and his face, already pale, turned the color of ash. What is the meaning of this? He stammered, trying to regain some semblance of authority. This is a hospital. You can't just... Silence, General Thorne commanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of absolute power. Finch's mouth snapped shut. You are Dr. Alistair Finch? I am the Chief of Surgery, Finch said, puffing out his chest. You are a person of interest in an ongoing national security investigation, Thorne stated flatly. Your authority in this hospital is hereby suspended, effective immediately. He then turned to Alara. Staff Sergeant Vance is now in command of all medical decisions regarding the patient known to you as John Doe. Her authority is absolute. You will provide her with any and all resources she requires. Is that understood? The entire ER staff stared, their jaws slack. They looked from the 4-star general to the mousy, clumsy nurse they had ridiculed for 2 years. They looked at the steely resolve in her eyes. It didn't make sense. Finch gaped at Alara. Her? Staff sergeant? She's an incompetent, insubordinate nurse. She assaulted my security staff. I fired her. You fired the most decorated combat medic of the last decade, Thorne countered, his voice dripping with ice. You've barred the one person in this city capable of saving my son's life, and in doing so, you exposed your own complicity. He nodded to his men. Secure him. Communications blackout. I want his phone, his pager, his laptop. Everything. 2 operators moved on Finch, who began to blubber. This is insane. I'm a respected surgeon. I'll sue. I'll call my lawyer. They ignored his protests, efficiently patting him down and seizing his devices. Alara didn't watch. She was already moving toward Trauma Bay 3. The world had slowed down. The chaos of the ER was now a set of variables she could process and control. She was no longer hiding. She was operating. She entered the bay. Sarah was there, trying her best to keep Alex Thorne stable. Alara, I didn't know what to do. His pressure is dropping again. You did good, Sarah, Alara said, her voice calm and reassuring. The commander was gone, replaced by the medic. You did great, but I've got it from here. She walked to the gurney. Master Sergeant Alex Thorne's eyes were open, and they were fixed on her. The glazed-over look was gone. He was present. He was aware. They called you. Staff Sergeant, he rasped, his voice still weak. Alara gave him a small, sad smile. Old habits die hard. She began checking his vitals, her hands moving with an expert's touch. How are you feeling, Master Sergeant? He managed a faint, grim smile. Like I got hit by a truck. Close enough, she said. Your intracranial pressure is still critical. The mannitol bought us time, but it's a temporary fix. We need to get you to a proper surgical suite with a neuro team. But this hospital isn't secure. As if on cue, a sudden sharp crack echoed from the hallway, followed by a grunt of pain. One of the general's men shouted, Contact! Janitor with a concealed weapon! Alara's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide with alarm. They're already here. She didn't wait for orders. She grabbed the gurney's release lever. We have to move, now! Just then, a man in a janitor's uniform burst into the trauma bay. He wasn't holding a mop. He was holding a pistol fitted with a suppressor. He raised the weapon, aiming it directly at Alex's head. Sarah screamed. The assassin never got the shot off. Alara moved with explosive speed. In one fluid motion, she grabbed a heavy steel oxygen tank from its rack and swung it like a baseball bat. The tank connected with the assassin's arm with a sickening crunch of bone. The pistol clattered to the floor. The man screamed, clutching his shattered wrist. But Alara wasn't finished. She dropped the tank and flowed forward. A quick jab to the throat to disrupt his breathing, followed by a knee to the solar plexus that folded him in half. As he doubled over, she clasped her hands together and brought them down on the back of his neck in a perfectly executed rabbit punch. The assassin collapsed to the floor, unconscious, but alive. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds. The trauma bay was silent, save for the beeping of the monitor and Sarah's ragged breathing. Sarah stared, her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror and disbelief. She had just watched the quietest, most timid person she knew dismantle a trained killer with brutal efficiency. General Thorne and 2 of his operators rushed in, weapons raised. They took in the scene, the unconscious assassin on the floor, the dropped pistol, and Alara standing over him, her chest heaving slightly, her eyes blazing with a cold fire they hadn't seen before. Situation report, Sergeant, the general barked. Asset is secure. Hostile neutralized. Non-lethal, Alara reported, her voice as crisp and formal as his. But this position is compromised. We need to exfil. Immediately. Thorne nodded, his face grim. Agreed. We have a hard site prepped. It's remote. Off-grid. He looked at his son, then at Alara. Can you keep him stable for a 30-minute transport? It's going to be rough. I can keep him stable, Alara said with absolute certainty. But we're not taking your helicopters. If they knew he was here, they'll be watching the airspace. They'll shoot us down. What do you suggest? The general asked, deferring to her expertise. Something they won't be looking for, Alara said, her mind already working 3 steps ahead. Something low profile. We need an ambulance. A standard city ambulance. Finch, who was being held in the corridor, overheard this. You can't just take an ambulance, he protested weakly. Alara fixed him with a glare that could freeze fire. Watch me. 10 minutes later, they were ready. Alara had stabilized Alex in a transport-ready state, a complex web of IV lines and portable monitors surrounding him. She had swapped her scrubs for a paramedic's uniform, taken from the hospital's locker room. It fit. General Thorne's men had secured an ambulance from the bay. The driver and his partner were told it was a federal emergency and were given a choice: help or be detained. They chose to help. I'll ride with you, the general said. No, sir, Alara countered firmly. You're too high profile. You and your men need to create a diversion. Take your helicopters and fly east, fast and loud. Make them think you're moving him by air. We'll go west. Just me, the patient, and a driver. We'll be just another ambulance in the city. The general hesitated, his protective instincts warring with his tactical sense. He looked at Alara, at the unwavering confidence in her eyes. This was Staff Sergeant Angel Vance. She knew what she was doing. Do it, he commanded. He clasped her shoulder. Keep him alive, Sergeant. That's the mission, sir, she replied. They loaded Alex into the back of the ambulance. Alara climbed in after him, the doors swinging shut. Through the back window, she saw the general's men hustling a struggling Dr. Finch into an armored vehicle. She saw Sarah watching from the ER doorway, her expression one of utter astonishment. Then the ambulance pulled out, its siren silent, and melted into the late-night traffic. In the back, it was just Alara and Alex. The city lights flashed across his face. Just like old times, huh, Angel? He murmured, his voice faint. He must have heard the general use her call sign. Alara's hands were busy checking a drip rate, but she paused. Not quite, Reaper. Last time I did this, I was pulling you out of a burning hind. Alex's eyes widened in recognition. The Cush? That was you? The PJ who pulled me and my team out? I never saw your face. I was wearing a helmet, she said quietly, and you were busy. You saved my life then too, he said, a new level of respect in his voice. I owe you twice. Let's not make it a third, she said, her focus returning to the monitors. Just stay with me, Alex. We're not clear yet. The safe house was a rustic, isolated cabin deep in the forested hills west of the city. It looked ordinary, but Alara knew it was hardened, stocked, and wired. They arrived just before dawn, the ambulance pulling up a hidden dirt track. A small, elite team of Thorne's most trusted operators were there to meet them. They helped Alara move Alex inside, where a makeshift but highly advanced medical bay had been set up in the main room. Pressure is stable, but the window the Manitol bought us is closing, she announced as they transferred him to a medical bed. He needs surgery to relieve the pressure definitively, a craniotomy, and I don't have the equipment for that here. A mobile surgical team is en route, one of the operators, a man named Jax, informed her. But they're 2 hours out. Can you hold him? I'll have to, she said, already preparing a new cocktail of medications. Keep the perimeter tight. The enemy knows they lost him at the hospital. They'll be hunting, and they'll be angry. The next hour was a tense wait. Alara worked tirelessly, minutely adjusting medications, monitoring every flicker of Alex's vitals. He drifted in and out of consciousness. During a lucid moment, he looked at her. Finch, he said, his voice a low growl. He was paid. I heard the name of the broker before they ambushed me. A man named Corda. It fits, Alara said, noting it down. If we can link Finch to Corda, we can unravel their whole network. Suddenly, the operator at the window stiffened. "Contact!" he hissed. "Multiple vehicles, no headlights, coming up the access road." Jax checked his tablet, which was linked to thermal drone surveillance. Damn it. At least a dozen hostiles. Mercs, well armed. They found us. The siege had begun. "Lock it down," Jax commanded. "Alara, stay with the asset." The peaceful cabin transformed into a fortress. Steel shutters slammed over the windows. The operators took up defensive positions. The quiet of the forest was shattered by the first volley of automatic gunfire peppering the cabin walls. Alara ignored it. Her focus was on Alex. The stress of the situation was causing his vitals to fluctuate wildly. "I'm losing him!" she yelled over the din of the firefight. A bullet punched through the wall near her head, showering her with splinters. She didn't flinch. She was back in the dust, back in the chaos. She was in her element. "I need to do a burr hole," she declared. "It's a field procedure to relieve the pressure. It's risky as hell, but it's his only shot." "You have the gear for that?" Jax asked, firing a controlled burst through a gun port. "I have a hand crank drill in my old kit," she said, pulling the battered case from her bag. "It'll have to do." What followed was a scene of impossible contrast. In the middle of a raging firefight, with bullets tearing the cabin apart, Alara Vance became a surgeon. She shaved a small patch of Alex's hair, sterilized the area with alcohol, and began to drill into his skull with a manual drill. Her hand was rock steady. Her focus was absolute. "They're breaching the south wall!" an operator shouted. An explosion rocked the cabin, throwing Alara against the wall. She recovered instantly, shielding Alex's head with her own body. "I'm almost through," she grunted. There was a small pop as the drill bit broke through the bone. A dark trickle of blood and cerebrospinal fluid welled up. The reading on the portable ICP monitor beside the bed began to drop immediately. "Pressure is falling," she reported, breathing a sigh of relief. "He's stabilizing." But their victory was short-lived. The front door burst inward, splintered by a battering ram. Two heavily armed mercenaries stormed in. Jax shot one, but the other raised his rifle to fire at Alara and her patient. From the bed, Alex's hand shot out and grabbed a scalpel from the tray Alara had been using. With a guttural roar, he threw it. The blade spun end over end and embedded itself in the mercenary's thigh. The man screamed and dropped his rifle. Before the second merc could react, Alara was on him. She had picked up the dropped pistol from the assassin at the hospital. She hadn't given it up. Now she used it. 2 shots. Center mass. The mercenary dropped. She was no longer just a medic. She was a warrior. A protector. The firefight raged for another 10 minutes that felt like an eternity. The 4 operators and 1 wounded master sergeant, led by a combat medic, held off a force 3 times their size. Alara divided her time between tending to Alex, patching up a wounded operator, and laying down suppressive fire from a window. Then, just as they were running low on ammunition, they heard it. The beautiful, terrifying sound of incoming Apache gunships. General Thorne's diversion was over. The cavalry was here. The roar of 30mm cannons ripped through the forest, turning the mercenaries' vehicles and positions into shredded, burning metal. The attack faltered, then broke. The survivors fled into the woods, only to be hunted down by the ground troops the Apaches had deployed. Silence descended, broken only by the crackle of burning wreckage and the ticking of the cooling gunship engines. General Thorne was the first one through the door of the battered cabin. He took in the scene, the dead mercenaries, the smell of cordite, his wounded but alive son, and Alara, her face grim, a pistol in her hand, standing guard. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a respect that transcended rank. "Report, Sergeant." "Asset is stable," she said, her voice weary but firm. "I performed a field expedient burr hole. He's out of immediate danger, but he needs that surgical team. The perimeter is secure, thanks to you." "The surgical team is here," Thorne said, and indeed, a new team of medics was entering the cabin. He looked at the carnage. "You did this? With 4 men?" 5, Alex rasped from the bed, holding up the bloody scalpel. Alara shook her head. We held the line, sir. The next phase of the battle was not fought with guns, but with information. While Alex was airlifted to Walter Reed Medical Center under heavy guard, General Thorne and his intelligence team worked with the evidence Alara and Alex had provided. The name, Corda, the captured assassin, and the biggest prize of all, Dr. Finch. Faced with a recording of his phone call to Corda's broker, a call made from the phone Thorne's men had confiscated, Finch's arrogance crumbled. He confessed everything. He had been in deep with loan sharks connected to Corda's organization. They had offered to wipe his debt clean in exchange for one small favor, ensuring a specific John Doe didn't survive the emergency room. He had never imagined it would lead to this. The public climax came 2 days later. Metropolitan General Hospital called a press conference to address the security incident. Dr. Alistair Finch, flanked by the hospital's board and lawyers, was prepared to deliver a masterclass in deflection. He would paint himself as the victim, a dedicated doctor whose hospital was invaded by overzealous military forces, and blame the entire incident on a rogue, unstable nurse. He stepped up to the podium in the hospital lobby, the cameras flashing. As chief of surgery, he began, his voice smooth and practiced. My primary concern has always been, and will always be, the safety of my patients and my staff. The events of 2 nights ago were the result of a tragic breakdown initiated by a deeply disturbed and dangerously incompetent employee, Alara Vance. That's a lie. The voice cut through the room. The reporters turned. Walking through the main entrance was General Marcus Thorne, in full dress uniform. At his side was Alara Vance. She was not in scrubs or a paramedic's uniform. She was wearing her own Air Force dress blues, her chest adorned with ribbons, the Distinguished Service Cross prominent among them. She looked regal, powerful, unbreakable. Finch froze at the podium, his mouth hanging open. The color drained from his face. Dr. Alistair Finch is not a victim, General Thorne announced, his voice booming through the lobby. He is a paid conspirator in an act of terrorism against the United States. He took a bribe to murder a decorated American soldier. A wave of gasps and frantic murmurs swept through the press corps. This is slander, Finch shrieked, finding his voice. There's no proof. We have your confession, Doctor, Thorne said coldly, and we have this. He nodded to an aide, who connected a device to the room's sound system. Finch's voice filled the air, panicked and pleading, detailing his deal with the broker. The recording ended. The silence in the room was absolute. Finch stood, shaking, exposed, and utterly defeated. She tricked me, he whimpered, pointing a trembling finger at Alara. That woman, she's not a nurse. She's some kind of monster. That monster, General Thorne said, stepping forward to stand next to Alara, is Staff Sergeant Alara Vance, a hero who saved my son's life not once, but twice in the last 48 hours. She is a woman who, after experiencing the horrors of war, sought only a quiet life, a life that you, Doctor, made a living hell out of your own petty cruelty and ego. As if on cue, 2 military police officers moved through the crowd and walked up to the podium. Dr. Alistair Finch, one of them said, you are under arrest for conspiracy, attempted murder, and treason. Finch collapsed into sobs as they cuffed him. No! I'm the chief of surgery. I'm important, he wailed as they dragged him away, his cries echoing through the lobby where he had once been king. A smattering of applause started, led by Sarah, the young nurse, who was standing at the back of the crowd, tears of vindication streaming down her face. Soon, the entire room was applauding the quiet nurse they had never truly seen, applauding the hero who had been hiding in plain sight. Alara stood tall, the applause washing over her. It wasn't shame that burned her cheeks now, but a pride she hadn't felt in a very long time. She had not failed. She had not broken. She had held the line. Later, after the storm had passed, General Thorne found her standing on the hospital roof, looking out over the city. Master Sergeant Thorne is stable and asking for you, he said. He'll make a full recovery thanks to you. The neurosurgeons at Walter Reed said your burr-hole procedure was textbook perfect under impossible conditions. I'm glad I could help, Alara said softly. You did more than help, Alara, the general said, using her first name for the first time. You reminded me what a true hero looks like. It's not about rank or accolades. It's about doing the right thing, no matter the cost, he paused. SOCOM is authorizing the creation of a new unit, a fast response, special operations surgical team. A small, elite group capable of performing life-saving interventions anywhere in the world, under any conditions. They call it the Angel Team. He looked at her, a serious, hopeful expression on his face. It needs a commander, someone with expertise in both advanced field medicine and special operations, someone who knows how to lead from the front. The job is yours, if you want it. He was offering her a way back, not to the life she had run from, but to a new one. A life where she wouldn't have to hide her skills. A life where she could be who she was truly meant to be. She thought of the shame, the fear, the quiet desperation of the last 2 years. She thought of the fire she had felt when she stood up to Finch. She thought of Alex, and the promise to leave no one behind. She looked at the general, and for the first time in a long time, she smiled. A real, genuine smile. I accept, sir. 1 week later, Alara Vance walked across the tarmac of a secure military airfield. She wore a flight suit, and she moved with a purpose and confidence that was breathtaking to behold. The mousy nurse was a distant memory, a ghost of a ghost. A helicopter, a sleek pavehawk, waited for her, its rotors already beginning to turn. Standing near the door was Alex Thorne. He was out of the hospital, leaning on a single crutch, but otherwise looking strong. He smiled as she approached. Heard you were looking for a new partner, Commander, he said, his voice laced with humor. I need someone to carry the bags, Master Sergeant, she retorted, her eyes sparkling. I think I can handle that, he said. He offered her his hand. She took it. Thank you, Alara. For everything. Just doing my job, she said. Together, they climbed into the helicopter. The ramp closed. The engines roared to life, and the pavehawk lifted off the ground, banking sharply towards the rising sun. Alara looked out the window, at the world spreading out below. She was no longer running from her past. She was flying toward her future, and she was no longer alone. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. The story teaches us that true strength and capability are not defined by job titles or the opinions of arrogant people. It's about character, integrity, and the courage to do what is right, even when it's hard. Alara's journey shows that you should never judge a book by its cover, because heroes often hide in the most unexpected places. In the end, doing the right thing will always be rewarded, and those who abuse their power will face justice. What would you have done if you were in Alara's position? Would you have risked your career to save a stranger? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Have a nice rest of your day.